I'm going to introduce our next speaker now, and I would appreciate it if you listened, but you don't have to. This is Ian from Etsy, and one of the reasons I'm really excited that he's here is that he's not only at Etsy, which does awesome stuff, but he also lives in Minnesota. So, yes, cheers to that. And the more Minnesota people we have doing the really cool stuff, the more they can teach us about how to get the rest of us there. And we were in a really nice session yesterday on talking about postmortems. He's going to talk some more about that today. One of the other things that I really appreciate about Ian is, and he will not sound Minnesotan when he speaks, so don't expect a Minnesota accent, but he's lived here for 10 years now, so he is an honorary adopted Minnesotan. And he's also a remote worker, which I certainly appreciate. Having a commute from upstairs to downstairs makes it nice and easy every day. And it seems like that's one of the last vestiges of companies doing more and more modern stuff, is the ones that have figured out how do we do that effectively on a global basis, and how do we manage to hire the best people wherever they are. If they're not in the Bay Area or in New York, who cares? Because we'll hire them, we'll have them work remotely. So with that, Ian's going to take it away.
Thank you. As Donnie said, I don't have the Minnesotan accent yet, but I'm working on it. So I've been, as Donnie says, I've been in the US for 10 years. I've been at Etsy for almost 5 now, which means that I've been fortunate to basically be at Etsy for pretty much the entirety of our transition into what we'd call DevOps now. And it's been fascinating, a really great learning experience. But the thing that's always interested me most about what we've been doing is how we're dealing with failure. And that ends up being a theme about in the things that I talk about. So today I'm going to talk about fallible humans, that sort of difficult bit of where humans go awry and how we deal with it, and how we can make the best of it. But before I get into that, I'm going to go into a little history, assuming my remote works. Come on. See failure everywhere. Fine spacebar. I will. There we go. History in the making. So, in ancient Israel, every year, the priests of the temple would select 2 goats. And they would ritually take the sins of the Israelites and place them upon these 2 goats. One goat was taken to the temple and sacrificed. The other goat, the scapegoat, was driven into the wilderness to die. Now, the effectiveness of this is something that we'll have to leave to theologians, but we can say with certainty that it sucked to be a goat. The ancient Greeks, never once to do things by halves, would respond to catastrophes like plague or famine or invasion by selecting someone, typically a beggar or a cripple or a criminal. And this person, the pharmakos, would be beaten, stoned, and driven from the city. Modern science suggests that didn't work terribly well, but the idea that we can gain cleansing, that we can make our situation better by the expulsion of some individual, is remarkably persistent. The word scapegoat is well embedded in our in our language and in our thinking. But what you'll notice in both of those examples is that the person or the thing that took the blame was what you might call an other, a criminal, a cripple, someone different, or an animal. And today, we still tend to want to blame an other, to see someone different from us take the fall for our woes. In an engineering context, traditionally, we have these functional silos that you've heard so much about over the last 2 days. We've got dev over here, ops over there, marketing over there, legal, last seen 2 weeks ago talking to some people in suits. And these provide easy access to others. It's very easy to blame ops. BOFHs. Ops didn't keep to their SLA. Dev made unreasonable demands 2 days before launch. Legal insisted that we rewrite everything halfway through the product development. Outside of the functional silos, you have more subtle sources of others. in our unconscious biases like gender or educational background. But with blame comes fear. Fear of loss of status among our peers. Fear of never getting a promotion or losing our job. Fear of never getting to work on the cool projects, the interesting projects, the risky projects. And that's not healthy. It's also not effective because you're not learning then from the mistakes. The Greeks kept succumbing to plagues because it turns out that beating up a beggar is less effective at fixing plagues than having a functioning sewerage system. So in DevOps, we do away with these silos as much as possible. We bring everyone together. And as we cooperate, as we increase the interactions between these different functional groups, and I had to add, I keep missing functional groups off this. I had add security in yesterday because I realized I'd missed Ben. But of course, there are many more functions. But we increase this cross-collaboration throughout the product lifecycle, and we reduce the availability of these others. So while what I'm going to be talking about today, blame, its origins, why it's bad, how we overcome it, while that's actually applicable to any organization, it's vital for a DevOps organization. So why do we blame? Very philosophical question. And Nietzsche comes to the rescue in the Twilight of the Idols. With the unknown, one is confronted with danger, discomfort, and care. The first instinct is to abolish these painful states. First principle, any explanation is better than none. And in most cases, the most readily available explanation is human error. If you look at the language of newspaper reports or accident investigations of accidents, you'll often see human error cropping up again and again. In IT, our dominant narrative is that computers are understandable, deterministic, and safe. Humans interfere. Humans do the wrong thing at the wrong time. Humans are fallible. Now, psychologist B.F. Skinner was the inventor of the operant conditioning chamber, or Skinner box, which is a device whereby you can give a rat a treat if it does the thing that you want, or an electric shock if it doesn't. And the learnings that he had from the Skinner box has been widely adopted by everyone from Facebook game makers to engineering managers. all the managers are like, I haven't given anyone an electric shock. But what Skinner had found was, as he said, a person who has been punished is thereby not simply less inclined to behave in a given way. At best, he learns to avoid punishment. But the problem, of course, is that failure happens anyway. Failure is an emergent property of a complex system, because we are working on complex systems. If you think about a website, the thing that we tend to do day in, day out, you've got everything from the social complexity of the organization that's producing it, all of the engineers, the ops, all of those other people in those other functional groups, how they interact. Do they get on? Are they talking? Through to the programming work that we do, the software that we write, all of the interactions between all of those components, that's incredibly complex. The software that we're using, the web servers, database servers, the machines that they're running on, the networks that the data is running over, through to the client machines, the browsers, and of course, the users, the lovely, exciting, complex users. And failure emerges from this, just as a natural property. There are too many interactions for us to fully understand these systems. We can't understand how it will fail. So what Skinner's saying is that if we're blaming, if we're punishing for failure, and failure happens anyway, all we're doing is sweeping things under the carpet. All we're going to do is try to push the blame away. We're going to hide our mistakes and not admit to them, or at best try to push it onto someone else, let someone else take the fall. And as a result, organizations don't learn, and we should learn. I don't think it's a particularly contentious idea that we should learn from our mistakes. Because failures are windows into complex systems. They're an opportunity for us to see some of these interactions that were hidden to us before. And they're a way and an opportunity for us to make our systems safer. Not safe, these are complex systems, but safer. We can approach it, we can head towards it, we can be in a better place if we learn. So humans are busy failing here, there, and everywhere, and yet here we are, well-trained professionals, and yet we still fail. And it's a truth, I hope, that you don't come to work to do a bad job. If you do, your organization has a bigger problem than any of the failures that you might engender. You're spending a lot of time and effort on hiring and recruiting and retention. And if you've got people coming to work to do a bad job, there is a bigger problem, and you need to dig into that as well. But let's assume, for the sake of argument, that you come to work to do a bad job. You don't come to work in the morning and say, I'm going to take the site down today. This is going to be my plan, to-do list item. So what humans are actually doing, as they come to work to do a good job, is that they're suffering from multiple conflicting constraints. And this is here's an example. You have to get the feature out on time, but don't have any bugs, and don't use too many resources. These are conflicting constraints. Monitor everything. We want to monitor everything. We want to know everything that's going on. We need to alert. But then you've got ops being woken up throughout the night because you're getting alert fatigue. Conflicting constraints. And it turns out that what humans are really good at is solving these things and balancing these constraints. And this is the human action that helps to make complex systems safe, because we're working out how to balance all of these complex constraints. And we do this typically by trading off between efficiency and thoroughness. You can look at various trade-offs, but efficiency and thoroughness is the one that we generally work on. This is what Eric Holnagel called the efficiency-thoroughness trade-off, or ETO principle. You can be efficient, you can get a lot of stuff done, but it's hard to be thorough then. It's hard to go into all the detail. You can be thorough, you can really dig into a problem and try and understand it very well, but that takes time. You become inefficient. Or, what generally happens, of course, is that you're not at either extreme. What humans are doing is choosing, through experience and learned heuristics, where on this scale, on this spectrum, you're going to operate at any given time. So given your understanding of the system, given the data that you have, given all of the constraints that you understand to exist, where on that efficiency thoroughness spectrum are you going to operate at any given time? And you're making that decision throughout the day. Now you might think, from a system safety point of view, we really want to land on the thoroughness side. It would be better to make sure that we've dug in better. But the problem with that is if following all the rules reduces your efficiency. If I'd observed all the rules, I'd have never got anywhere. And that in itself can cause failures because you can't respond quickly to a problem. You're too busy dealing with all the rules. One of the most effective forms of industrial action isn't a strike, but a work to rule. You follow every single rule, every single regulation to the letter without fail, and typically an organization becomes crippled. And it turns out that organizations have all of these rules, and they only function because humans are doing these efficiency thoroughness trade-offs. They're working out what they need to do to get what they need to get done. And that means sometimes working around rules, regulations, and things. So this is what you're doing day in and day out. When you're making a change, do you have your diff reviewed by everyone in the company? Many eyes make bugs shallow, etc. When you push, do you check every single graph of every metric that you track? Or do you just push your code straight out? Don't bother about the tests. Push it straight to production. It'll be good. YOLO. It's fine, I'm off to lunch. It'll be good. Those are extremes, efficiency, thoroughness. But you're actually making your choices. If you're, depending on what you're doing, if you're doing something complicated, maybe you're swapping out your master database, real brain surgery on your site, you're going to tend towards thoroughness. This isn't something you do just before coffee. This is something where you take time, you talk to people, lots of people. You do game days, you do contingency planning. You dig into everything that might possibly go wrong. And when it comes time to do it, everyone's sitting at their desks, everyone's ready, everyone knows what they're going to do. You've been very thorough, and it's taken time. If you're pushing out a little CSS change, you're going to look at it in your browser and say, yeah, that looks right. Maybe test it on a couple of platforms, run the automated tests, push it out, check it in production, and we're good. Let's move on with our day. We've been very efficient. But, of course, complex systems. they're designed to plague us. So it is quite likely that there is something in that database switch that you haven't thought about. There is some interaction that is hidden to you that you haven't covered because it's a complex system. Maybe it will bite you, maybe it won't. You might get lucky today. But that potential for failure is there. And I can tell you that one of my colleagues took the entire site down. Etsy went completely hard down with a CSS change. It was pretty special. He won an award for it. So formulated like that, blame becomes kind of ludicrous. Instead, you would start to ask questions like, why? Why did what you did make sense at the time? You've come to work to do a good job. You're not intentionally bringing the site down. Why did what you do make sense? Why did you think it was going to produce a beneficial result? What were the constraints you were trying to satisfy? What was your understanding of the system? And with those sorts of questions and that sort of culture, you're dealing with trust. You've hired well. You have well-trained people who are working to produce all the outcomes of the company wants, that all the customers want. So you have trust. You trust that your employees are doing what they're meant to be doing. And you understand that sometimes things go wrong. And in the open spaces yesterday where we were talking about blameless postmortems, and someone said that they came to blamelessness and they thought, it's a way to be nice. It's not nice to blame. But that's not the case. I mean, it is the case. It is nice not to blame. But it gets into something deeper, that this blame is hiding things that we should be learning from. So that sounds lovely. Let's do it. How do we go about it? So I'm going to get a little self-help guru for a minute and say, don't blame yourself. Let's have a big hug. This was something that my colleague Jessica Harley showed me really well. She wrote a really great blog post about self-blame and how it was causing a problem. But typically, you were your biggest critic. And when something goes wrong, you get that ice water down the spine feeling as the site suddenly appears to be crumbling and everything's going wrong. And you get that Nietzschean anxiety going. And the first thing that you reach for is, I suck. I am a failure. I don't know what I'm doing. And then you get that, that way lies imposter syndrome and misery, and you shut that down. And you get away from it as quickly as possible. You stop all of that introspection, and you stop all of that learning. And overcoming that is really hard. But it's very valuable. And the great thing about it is that it'll actually work for you, even if you're not in an organization that is blameless, that has adopted blamelessness as a culture. If you take one thing from this talk, it would be to ask yourself the question, why did what I did make sense to me at the time? And ask that question more often. But it is easier to do it as a group. Groups give you perspective. Groups help you overcome this tendency towards self-blame. And you get richer sets of questions, better digging into what happened, but through dialogue. The other advantage of doing it as a group is that it reinforces the idea that blamelessness is a thing that we do. It's not just something, I saw a presentation on it at DevOpsDays and it looked great. How nice. It's part of our culture. It's part of what we do. And you reinforce that by working together in a group and constantly talking about it. And the other thing that groups allow you to do is to bring in diverse perspectives. Very diverse perspective, ideally. At Etsy, we try and make sure that our postmortems are widely publicized throughout the company. And they're open to anyone. If you want to go to a postmortem, doesn't matter what job function you're in, you can go to a postmortem. If you have something to contribute, great. If you just want to listen, also fine. Reinforces this is a thing that we do. But it means that we have people from diverse backgrounds. We've had our chief financial officer come into to postmortems, especially ones to do with money. Can't imagine why she'd be interested in things that involve money, being a CFO, but she is. But what that gives us is the perspective of a completely different department. We get finance's perspective. What are finance's constraints? What are finance's goals? Do they align with engineering's? Are they in conflict? How can we resolve those conflicts? We learn, and we learn beyond the pure engineering into how do we make the entire business better? What can we learn about the business because of this failure? And you do it again and again. You keep doing it. Complex systems. Again, reinforcing that this is a thing that we do. But you don't have to wait for failure. Catherine made a great point in the previous thing. You can review anything. Hiring is a great one to review. This is something that you're spending a lot of time, effort, and money on. If you had a problem with that, where did it go wrong? It doesn't even have to be something that went wrong. You can review what things that went right. Those are great things to review. Lots of fun. What did we do that was right? Did we have near misses? Near misses are great to dig into because those happen all the time. How did we identify that the problem was about to happen, and how did we overcome it? How did we work around it? What have we learned about that? And you can do PR campaigns. We've done reviews on all sorts of things. But having that habit and having reviews crop up regularly just reinforces that that's a thing that we do. And it means you get more practice and you get better at it. Now, I said that self-blame is really hard to overcome. Harder than that still is hindsight. Because the hindsight is part and parcel of how we as humans view the past. It's part and parcel of how we analyze what happened. And the problem, as the saying goes, is that hindsight is 20/20. If you look back at an incident, the calamity that befell us becomes inevitable. Here is it's clear as day. These things happened, and of course the site exploded. And the people who couldn't see that at the time were clearly idiots. Obviously, how could they not? It was obvious. Hindsight. And what you find is that you start talking in what we call counterfactuals. Counterfactuals, reasoning about things that didn't happen, counter to the facts. More simply, we can call them the coulda, woulda, shouldas. He could have talked to Jennifer in Ops, who would have told him that this change would kill the databases. A good engineer would have tested this feature more thoroughly. I should have practiced this talk more. But they're not helpful. They're not going to help you learn at all. Why didn't he talk to Jennifer? Did he not know to? Did he talk to someone else in Ops who told him it would be fine? Had he made this change 100 times before and it had never caused the site to explode? Would it have been fine had it not been for some other change that he was unaware of, that was loading the databases, and together those blew everything up? And I said a good engineer would have tested this feature more thoroughly. And you get this idea of a good engineer comes up all the time, and it's incredibly blameful. Think about how it is. A good engineer would have tested this feature more thoroughly. You did not test this feature more thoroughly. You are a bad engineer. But what you're doing is you're making a judgment about an efficiency-thoroughness trade-off that was made in the past. And yes, in hindsight, it was wrong. But why was that trade-off made? Why did the engineer in question make those choices? Why did it appear that this would give a good result? And of course, it could be that had the engineer in question made a different choice, they would have been in a different review saying, why did the feature not ship on time, and how did we use so many QA resources? Now, counterfactuals are okay. I said they're hard to overcome. They'll come up in your discussions. You'll find yourself saying these coulda, woulda, shouldas. And it's okay. Just be aware of them, be conscious of them, flag them. Make sure, as you're doing this in a group, if someone's saying, a counterfactual, you say, you are reasoning with counterfactuals, this isn't helpful, let's concentrate on what we call the local rationality, what made sense at the time. So just be aware that it exists, be aware that it will lead you down the wrong path. And as you go down the path, typically what you're looking for is a root cause. And we're kind of trained to think, why happened because X? We will go and we will investigate and we will find out what X was. But complex systems, they don't fail that way. Typically what you get is a multitude of small failures, each necessary for the global failure, but not sufficient. If you pick any one of those as your root cause and say, this was X, this is what caused it, you will be wrong. You will not have truly understood the nature of the failure, and you can't properly learn from it. So you have multiple root causes, effectively. And we think about timelines. We tend to think linearly. We're looking at X, Y, Z, boom. And again, it doesn't really tend to fail that way. You have instead, there's a wibbly-wobbly ball of timey-wimey stuff. Where you have all of these things happening at the same time and in interesting ways. And this affected this and this and this and this. And it's not this nice, neat, linear story that you can tell. So getting comfortable with that and learning to deal with that and understand that you're going to get this slightly messy outcome is important. Root causes tend to be constructed rather than found. The root cause is basically what we say, this is where we're stopping. Again, it's an efficiency-thoroughness trade-off. In your investigation, you do efficiency-thoroughness trade-offs. How deep are you going to go? At what point are you going to say, we've gone enough, this is what we've found? And the aim, of course, is to learn. And how you learn from your investigations depends very much on the organization. It depends on the nature of the failure and the people involved. But often what you're getting is remediation items out at the back. Remediation items are the outputs of your review of the things that we are going to do. But I've said seek good remediation items. You need to think critically about what you're doing, because you want to make sure that your remediation items aren't worse than the failure that you had in the first place. There's a tremendous social pressure to come out of a review with a list of things, but it's actually acceptable to come out of an incident and say, that wasn't so bad. The cost of that was the cost of doing business. The things that we might do to stop it ever happening again are actually too expensive, too harmful to the business. The remediation is, well, we know this happens, and we'll deal with it. That's okay. Another common response is, we'll implement a process. We will come up with a new set of rules that people will follow, and this will never happen again. Now, Clay Shirky's adage, process is an embedded reaction to prior stupidity. It's pithy. It's also rather blameful. Stupidity isn't something that we really want to be making decisions about. But his point is valid. Your processes are basically the scar tissue in your organization from previous failures. And if you're not careful, that scar tissue builds up and slows you down and cripples you. Every process that you implement is one more thing for your employees, your colleagues, those fallible humans, to have to do an efficiency-thoroughness trade-off on. Am I going to follow this procedure, or am I going to get stuff done? And they'll make that call. And if they start to bend towards it's actually inefficient, I'm just going to do the old way, then you've learned precisely nothing and you've gained no safety. So beware of process. And out of all of this, you have your learning, and you have to talk about it. You have to tell people. It's no good learning locally. You need to tell people about it. And again, it's reinforcing blamelessness as a thing that we do. And what we found at Etsy as a blameless organization is that those closest to the incident, those historically who would be blamed most likely, are the ones who are leading the charge. They're the ones who are in the incident review. They're the ones who are talking about the timelines and working out what went wrong, taking ownership of the remediation items. And then you get these emails to the whole company saying, this is what I did, this is why it was bad and the site went bang, this is what we've learned, this is what we're doing. So it's the very opposite of what you would expect in a blameful environment, where people would hide and hope that no one would notice. And we actually expect now, culturally, we expect this behavior from engineers and product managers and other people who are making changes, that we will get this communication and we'll get this broad learning. Now, this is harder, I admit, in organizations that are not 100% on board with the whole blamelessness thing. But you have to get there somewhere, and the best way to do it is to show the benefit. And this is where the managers in the room, for whom I apologize about the skin box joke, I didn't mean it. The managers in the room have the big role to play here. You're the ones who are going to be encouraging it and fostering that within your teams, but also advocating for it across your peers and up the management chain. Because as with basically everything in DevOps culture, there's no royal road to blamelessness. I can't give you a Docker image for blamelessness. I can't have you chef blamelessness out to your colleagues. It'd be nice, wouldn't it? But I've given you ideas here. I can't even give you a do this, and voila, blamelessness. It's an evolution. It's an evolution of your company culture. It's an evolution of the ways in which you interact, an evolution of your colleagues and employees. And if you find that you're thinking, I really want to do more of this, this sounds great, I made you a reading list. I realized that everyone's been giving you homework. Here's some more. But by going towards blamelessness and embracing that learning culture, you're making your organization safer. You're making your employees happier through trust. And you're making your world a better place. And for that, I wish you the very best of luck. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Yeah, we've got time for a couple of quick questions. So who would like to kick it off? All right, so you have been fed knowledge by Etsy.
Oh, we have
there we go.
So I like what you're saying about the postmortems and updating your processes and procedures. My question is more where I have been in that situation and we have had something blow up. We had the postmortem, implemented a new procedure. Hey, we're going to do A, B, and C now first before we put it in production. Works great for 6 months, a year, and then, oh, wait. Ops is just being obstructive again. We need to push this out right now, and we haven't had issues lately. So I don't know if anybody else has been having these issues, but how do you deal with that?
So I think my sort of general thinking about processes, I was very anti-process in that. Processes have their place, but I think my general approach to processes is, if the person performing the process can't articulate why they're performing the process, then the process is flawed. Or your company culture and learning and training is flawed. So a process needs to have a reason for its existence beyond, this is the cargo cult or the first we must sacrifice a chicken type approach. It's like I don't know why we do it, but we've always done it this way. So that's the thing that I think you need to do with when you do have processes, is this is why this process exists. Yes, ops is being obstructive for a reason. These are the reasons. These are the risks of not following the process. Because any process can be violated, any process can be avoided, and you may want to. But it should be a conscious and deliberate choice and a conscious and deliberate trade-off that's well-informed.
Right.
Jeff?
So if it's quick and can be answered in one sentence, you get a question.
Ooh, that's a challenge.
No compound sentences.
So you learn in your blameless postmortem and you implement your process. How do you institutionalize that learning so in the future somebody can say, well, there's a damn good reason why we have this process because 2 years ago we took the entire site down?
That is a difficult question to answer, and I don't think we have I don't think we've properly achieved it yet. We have wikis. We have Morg, which is our open source postmortem tool, which allows you to track an incident. But tying that into the processes is then harder. I think a lot of the stuff that we end up doing is to avoid process and rely on maybe some programmatic constraints that basically enforce particular rules, such that it's less that we have to make these sort of decisions. But I don't think we have I don't have a good answer for you. I don't know that we've solved that problem yet.
Thanks a lot, Ian. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Please, yes.